Hello and welcome to the Faculty of Engineering Graduate Studies Ask Me Anything event for the Department of Mechanical and Mechatronics Engineering. My name is Sarah Landy. I'm the Manager of Graduate Operations for the Faculty of Engineering, and I will be your host for today's event. During the event, we will be hearing from faculty, current students, and admission experts from the Department of Mechanical and Mechatronics Engineering. We encourage you to use the Q&A button within your webinar screen to submit any questions you may have about our graduate programs for our panelists. You can also upvote questions submitted in the Q&A chat by clicking on the thumbs up icon. This shows us that many students are interested in the answer to that question. Within the chat, my colleagues Catherine, Jen, and Emily will be answering questions you have, as well as we'll be sharing some helpful links, so keep your eyes out for them. During the second half of the event, we will have our live Q&A session using the questions that were pre-submitted, as well as questions that are asked here in the Q&A chat. This event is being recorded and all information is current as of November 4th, 2021. So let's get started. I'd like to hand it over to our panelists now, so please welcome our first presenter, the Associate Chair of Graduate Studies for Mechanical and Mechatronics Engineering, Professor Cécile Deveau.
Okay, so thank you. Welcome everyone to our information session. Yes, so I am the associate chair for grad studies, and I'm just going to give you a brief overview to get started this presentation. So in terms of head counts for our grad students, we have around almost 150 graduate students, so 106 MN students, 148 MASC, and 186 PhDs. And really, we cover all the different kind of research areas, and I'm going to give you some examples, a very wide range of topics and specialization. We have several research centers and institutes affiliated with MME, and that typically will depend on your supervisor. So we have the Center for Bioengineering and Biotechnology, Advanced Materials Joining, AI. We have a big center on automotive research, nanotechnology, and sustainable energy. In terms of facilities, we have many new buildings here on campus. If you had a chance to come over, maybe soon, you will see that we have some very good looking buildings and very big. We also keep renovating graduate space, graduate office space and research labs and classrooms. This is always an ongoing process. We have some very well and large research, well-funded and large research facilities, and you're going to see some examples later on, but like MSAM, the additive manufacturing, RoboHub, the fire research facility. In terms of funding, for professors, there are different sources of funding, mostly NSERC and Ontario, and typically always in partnership with some companies in the industry. For students, the main two sources are again NSERC and the Ontario Graduate Scholarship. MyTax is also a good scheme, but that will typically be through your supervisor, and that's in collaboration with a company. So just a few illustrations of our research facilities. RoboHub, that is located in E7. So the fire research lab, where several different scales of experiments are conducted, small and large scales, welding and joining. There's also a test track that is off campus for automotive research. And of course, Waterloo, or I say of course, but the department is very strong on autonomous vehicles. So you're going to see quite a few of these self-drive vehicles around. Waterloo has a quite unique environment compared to other places. There's a strong startup culture. And if you're an inventor, if you have an idea, the IP will stay with you. So IP rights stay with the creators. And in terms of exposure, there are many different workshops. For example, if you're interested in teaching, you'll be able, for example, to take additional courses and even a certificate in teaching. If you're interested in business and entrepreneurship, again, many courses, many seminars, very, very vibrant culture of entrepreneurship here. and many students will actually start their own company. Anyway, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to let Fatima take over and explain a little bit her experience here in the department as a grad student.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fatima, and I'm excited to be talking to you about Waterloo and MME today. So I'm currently a PhD candidate with Professor Carl Dunn here, and Cecile spoke about our beautiful buildings, and here's just a headshot that everyone in my lab kind of took on the famous E5 bridge. So I just thought to include it that in addition to getting a degree from Waterloo, there are lots of places where you could get like professional looking pictures for free with your colleagues. So also, apart from doing a PhD, I actually did an MME, an MEng in MME here, which had the design. I also completed the design diploma, which had a co-op component. And I feel like my journey so far has been very interesting because I've had experience with a bit of that research as well as a bit of, like the industrial aspects. My current PhD research is actually with industrial partners as well. So I feel like most people think of grad school as just a path to academia, but there's so many things you could do with a graduate career, which I found interesting. Apart from that, I'm also a career leader at the Center for Career Action. So that's also another opportunity. I love to volunteer. I love to work with students and help. And, even outside of just teaching as a TA for courses, there are lots of opportunities to just, contribute in all the different ways you want to. So for example, I'm a graduate student representative on the accessibility committee. I also volunteer on the committee for responsible innovation and technology. So again, there are just different types of opportunities on campus where you can get a career, but even just develop yourself in service, academia, research, and so many things as a grad student. So next, I'm just going to share a bit about why I chose Waterloo and MME in the next slide. So kind of interestingly, a bit of background, I actually did my undergrad in electrical electronics engineering, which is why I kind of liked, I chose mechanical, even though my main research is now mainly mechanical. It actually does have a bit of even statistics component, but even the entire department, there's a mechatronics degree. So it's interdisciplinary. So you get to learn a lot of different things in the purpose of trying to get one career. Also, it's just, it's being surrounded by really, really intelligent and amazing people that are always innovating things. So that makes it very interesting and just makes you grow more. And I think specifically the grad journey is not even just about growing more intellectually, but you learn a lot about your tenacity. So for example, there's also versatility of experience. So this is a picture during my MEng co-op. I had experience to work in a clean room with cameras and all this, nanoscale, microscale equipment, which is something very interesting. And also, even that, I also had the opportunity to work with like a local poultry manufacturer. So all this diversity of experience just within one degree is just very interesting. And this is actually a picture from last month, working on my research, my PhD research. In this process, this is me designing and working with the machinist at the machine shop to build a vacuum chamber. So my research is on steel, but in that process, I'm learning about vacuum chambers, designing vacuum chambers, learning things about torque specifications and so many other things. So I put together just a little slideshow of what my PhD research is about and some of the cool phenomena we see. So this is a sample of advanced high strength being heated and in oxygen environment, and just seeing the oxidation transition and actually seeing metal glow so brightly and controlling temperature in such a small space. And also these are some of the different projects for my MEng as well, designing things, being able to do things from different aspects, from tires to dentistry and so on and so forth. So last but not the least, I just wanted to share that the research journey can be fun, and it's not just about that. I'm very, very lucky to be in an amazing lab. These are just some of the different fun activities we do in my lab. Even with the pandemic, we moved into doing travel vlogs. My supervisor suggested. So even though we were all locked up in the pandemic, we got through my colleagues, I got to learn a bit about China, about Taiwan, about Iran, about Russia, even parts of Ontario that I didn't know about. So and my supervisor, he's not here, but he's super, super nice. So there's an opportunity for you to learn so much, even academics, but also to meet great people and just learn from the different people's experiences. So grad life is, sometimes all encompassing. So I just wanted to share that. It can be fun, it can be enriching. So thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you so much for providing a platform for me to speak today. My name is Miguel, and I actually graduated from the Mechatronics engineering program here in Waterloo in 2008. And hopefully if we can transition to the next slide, I can talk about why I decided to actually come back and do my graduate studies at the University of Waterloo. So what I did after my undergraduate, I was actually looking for what's next. And likely many of you on the line are in the same position. And what attracted me to continue into a graduate degree at the University of Waterloo was this kind of huge possibility of either being really focused in my research or pursue something that's more multidisciplinary. So for me, this ability to choose based on the wealth of research expertise in our department, specifically in the mechanical and mechatronics engineering department, was something that was really, really valuable. So on my end, I chose to pursue a master's degree and then switched into a PhD. So I got my PhD degree and bypassed the master's, and I can speak about that as well. And I looked at developing a mechatronics system, a 3D printer from scratch that was able to print both ceramic and metal implants. So I worked in a very multidisciplinary research field where I had to draw expertise from mechatronics, from biomedical engineering, and many, many other fields as well. And really after graduating from my PhD and working within Canada and the US, I was really excited to come back and be part of a really rich department where we have more than 65 faculty members with an extraordinary capacity for research, as well as very, very interesting research expertise. Now, the way we are clustered within the department, so most faculty members within our department are clustered within so-called research clusters or groups. And we have, for instance, a group that focuses on materials engineering and processing, solid body mechanics and design, fluid mechanics, thermal engineering, and automation and controls. So when you're applying for a graduate degree, you may have to choose between these research clusters. However, what's really, really exciting is that the research cluster is mostly only there to kind of symbolize the main research thrust for your faculty member, but most faculty members have highly multidisciplinary research portfolios. And for instance, the research areas that are listed here may span multiple different areas of expertise. So again, materials manufacturing may span competencies in materials, automation and controls, and so on, as you saw with Fatima's research. So for instance, in my field, I work with additive manufacturing processes. However, the area of application of the processes may span biomechanics or may span other fields, for instance, propulsion and aerospace. So a lot of our faculty members do work in research areas that touch multiple different aspects, although they're clustered within a specific cluster on the right. So for instance, if we move to the next slide, I just wanted to give you an example, and this is fairly common with most faculty members, where although you have a research cluster and a research area, what you actually focus on can be quite multidisciplinary. And this is an example from our additive manufacturing group, where, for instance, I work with laser-based processes as well as electron beam processes to transform metal powders or ceramic powders into really beautiful and complex geometries or components that have very complex functionality. So for instance, when I look at graduate students, because the processes that I'm working with involve different levels of competencies, anywhere from material science to simulation and modeling, potentially looking at thermometry, for instance, machine vision, competencies, data science, and so on. So all of these different competencies are quite valuable, and we do have a very broad spectrum of research graduate or of graduate students that are within our portfolio. So do reach out to faculty members, and although they may be clustered within research areas or research clusters, their research may be actually quite rich. So for instance, you can reach out and talk to faculty member that may be involved in the RoboHub group. So we have very fairly well recognized facilities. As I mentioned, RoboHub, the Avril group, which is the group focusing on autonomous vehicle research. We also have groups that look at biomechatronics. You saw the fire testing lab that Professor DeVoe highlighted. So there are many research facilities that are available to graduate students and are quite searchable within the department's webpage, including, of course, I can speak to my competency in additive manufacturing, but hope to give voice to other colleagues through our discussion today. So really, when I started to look at graduate studies, if I were to give advice to myself and hopefully through that to people on the line, how should I, what really, if you answer yes to all of these questions, or at least two of them, then it really means that you may be well aligned to pursue a graduate study degree. So the first question is really, are you willing to dedicate time to really focus on a specific area, to dive deeper into a topic that you're really passionate about? And you really have to be passionate about that to dedicate 2 years all the way up to 4 or 5 years. Are you really interested to work with some of our faculty members and really engage with them to define a program or a research project that you are both happy with? And also, depending if you are at a master's level or PhD level, as Fatima mentioned, some of the problems that you're going to be working towards in your graduate studies apply quite well to industry, to solving industry problems. So are you looking for contributing in that space and oftentimes develop IP? So a lot of our students are really excited about that applied domain as well. Now, I'm here to answer a lot of questions that you may have. And, I listed some of the questions that I've prepared to answer in the background. So if you're interested about how to find a supervisor, how to learn about what professors are doing at the University of Waterloo, how to go about contacting faculty members to ask for supervision or inquire if they have positions available. If you're interested in what we are looking for in a student, or myself, what I'm looking for in a student, or if you are looking to understand how you can distinguish yourself from other students, or even how to find out more about scholarships, hopefully we'll be able to help you today. And I'd be very happy to answer your questions at the end of the panel. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a bit more detail on the admission and funding as well. So first, we have an MASC, which is a thesis and research-based program. For this, you need a supervisor in order to be accepted and admitted. But you don't need to have a confirmed supervisor to apply. So maybe later on we'll talk about some tips, but yeah, if you really don't know who you could work with, you don't have to find a supervisor before applying. So normal length, 2 years, six academic terms, and the minimum guaranteed funding that you will receive if you are accepted is $18,000 a year for 2 years. Then we also have a course-based master's. So this is the MH. For this one, you don't need to have a supervisor. You will only take courses, so no specific supervisor for this. It is self-funded, and there is no funding support right now from the department and university for this. The expected duration, 3 to 4 terms, full-time, from honors bachelor's degree. And we have several specialization or graduate diploma. So we have the green energy specialization. We have 2 graduate diplomas, one in engineering design and one in fire safety. We also have a co-op option viable, which is only for the design engineering at the GDIP. I should say as well, you don't have to choose your specialization or GDIP. If you just want to do a regular MA in mechanical and mechatronics engineering, that's fine too. In terms of, you have this table here on the slide showing you the guaranteed minimum funding for masters and PhDs. So masters, 18,000. For PhD, a little bit less than almost $25,000 a year for 4 years. You have some kind of average annual funding here on the second line, and this will include TAs. We have TA positions available every term, so that gives you an idea of how much you can get extra. And as well, you have the last line that gives you an idea of approximately what you're going to have left for all your living expenses once you pay the tuition. So for a master's student, MASC student, around $10,000 a year, tax-free, and for a PhD, around $15,000 a year, tax-free again. So there are some top-ups. So I think on the next slide, we're going to see different scholarships that you may apply for, or you have actually. So if you manage to get NSERC scholarship and sometimes OGS, but NSERC for sure, you will get a top-up from the university. So the top-up is going to be between $10,000 and $20,000. And you have here on the right-hand side, you have the important dates. So if you're thinking of applying for one of these scholarships, if you're MASC, for PhDs, for NSERC, it's too late. It's not too late for OGS. But anyway, December 1st for Masters NSERC and February 1st for OGS. You need, that's going to come, but you need to be a domestic student. So here actually you have something maybe a bit clearer in terms of what is available for domestic students. So this would be additional funding, and you don't have to do any additional application for this. This is something that will be determined at the admission, at the offer level. So you may get an entrance award, so $5,000. Engineering, the Faculty of Engineering has some excellence fellowships. So there are fellowships for MASC students, and also fellowship for PhDs. So if there's some question about this, I can give you a bit more details, but yeah, the value is $25,000 to $30,000 a year. And yeah, as I mentioned, some top-up that you would get automatically if you have an NSERC scholarship. And in this top-up, we didn't include any TA funding. If you work as a TA, this is in addition. That's not included in these numbers here. Something important, if you're an international student and PhD student, we have an equal funding for international PhD students. So typically, the tuition fees are much higher for international students. So if you apply for PhD and you get admitted, the what we call the differential fee will be covered by this International Doctoral Student Awards. So what I mean at the end of the day, that you will pay as an international PhD student, you will end up paying exactly the same amount of tuition, and you will end up with the same amount after tax compared to an equivalent domestic student. And yeah, you have the number here, 148 International Student Awards overall. Recently, the university and engineering in particular, had some additional scholarships. So one of the new ones is IBET. So this is for indigenous and Black identified students. And that's quite a good source of funding if you fall in the conditions of this scholarship in application. So between around $25,000 a year for 4 years, plus a top up here from your supervisor. So maybe the application deadlines are quite important not to miss them. So if I'm going to go in the same order, so for winter term, you would need to apply, which is too late, but you would need to apply for by June 1st of the previous year, spring term October 1st, and for fall term you need to apply by February 1st. Yeah, so if you're thinking of applying for fall next year, so maybe the important date here to remember is February 1st. And of course, you're going to have much more details if you check the GSPA website. So there's this kind of flow chart to give you the different steps. So if you're considering applying, the different steps you may want to take to be successful, or to put all the chances on your side. So first, explore the programs. And if you're attending this presentation today, I think that's a very good first step. You want to know more about the different research fields, the different programs. You want to ask as many questions as you can to really get the full picture. Then you want to review the admission requirements, prepare the application documents. If you are interested in a research degree, so MASC and PhD, so you can do that at the same time as step 3 and step 4. You may want to contact a supervisor or potential supervisors before submitting your application. So this can be quite effective. You can email individual professors and see if they have some positions, see if they would be interested in hiring you. You also want to establish a dialogue. You also want to be sure that you would like to work in this research field on a specific project with a specific supervisor. And then you apply, you upload your documents, and you hope for the best. And so that's it for me for the moment. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. So in the next, in the Q&A session. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much to all of our panelists. That was a wonderful presentation. So I think we're ready to begin the Q&A session. As a reminder, continue to submit your questions using the Q&A button within your webinar screen, and upvote any questions that you would like to hear the answer to. Krista, if you want to stop sharing the slideshow and then we can see everybody, that's great. Thank you. So our first question, I'm actually going to direct to our student panelists. Fatima, if there was something that you wish you knew before you had applied to your very first graduate program, what is something that you think would be wisdom to impart on all our prospective applicants?
I guess something that I wish, or that I learned by the end of my master's, that I wish I put in mind earlier, was just more like, it's not what you know that matters, it's what you're willing to learn. And why that is important, it's only because when you start to face challenges, because from undergrad, it's based on how much you know. So when you start to face problems that are, the answers are not just like 2 + 2 = 4, you start to feel like, oh my goodness, I don't know anything, I don't belong here or that. But it's really not about what you know, it's what you're willing to learn. So each time you face challenges or things, you know, remind yourself, why you are doing this. Do you want to dive deeper, as Professor Miguel said, that do you want to dive deeper into this, and then remind yourself why you started, and just reminding yourself that it's not really what you know that matters, it's what you're willing to learn. So if you're willing to learn whatever it would take to solve this challenge, and then that's fine.
That's great, wonderful advice. Thank you very much. Cecile, we talked about the 2 different master's programs that are available. Can you advise our prospective applicants, is it possible to switch from an MEng to an MASC degree?
Yes, it's possible. So, so if you start as an MEng student and then you're interested in MASC, first you need to find a supervisor. That's going to be really a big requirement. You need to find a supervisor who's willing to take you as a MASC student and provide funding. If you find a supervisor, let's say you want to do that relatively early as well. I think you have to do that within the first 2 terms, let's say maybe the first 3 terms. The advantage that you would be able to transfer, so if you transfer to MASC, if you pass some courses, and normally you should have passed some courses, you'll be able to transfer credits of these courses towards your MASC. So what that means as well, because typically, so MEng, you have to pass 8 courses. For MASC, it's 4 courses. So you may be able actually to, if you, like after 2 terms, you may have already your 4 graduate courses as a credit. So if you transfer to MASC, then you may be able to transfer these 4 courses and then just focus on the research aspect of your MASC. So this can be quite efficient. But the key is to find a supervisor. Yes.
Great. And that supervisor would in turn then provide you with funding for the remainder of your program. Is that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Mihaela, you were talking about contacting faculty members, and that's kind of the hardest part about sort of getting into a research-based program. What can a student do to stand out when they're contacting a prospective faculty member? Maybe they're sending out all these cold emails. What are some steps they can take to really shine through?
That's a really tough question because it's very custom to each student. So for instance, my recommendation is for you to really know what research you're passionate about or research area, and really tailor your email to that particular faculty member based on that area of expertise that overlaps, and really state what you think you bring to the table within that research space, or what you think you could contribute to that research space. Because a lot of times we get, maybe I would say, specifically now after November or between October and maybe January, February, we get mostly, about 10 emails per day. It's a very high volume of requests. And really the requests that stand out are the ones that really align well with the faculty member's research area, are well formulated in terms of, I think I can bring this to or I think my background, this is how it's going to maybe enrich this research area. And if you have any faculty members that you've worked with in the past that could speak for you, even putting that in your email, saying, I worked with this faculty member in country X, they could speak on my behalf. It's a lot easier for the faculty member than to just connect with that professor and say, hey, is this a good fit? So try to bring all those elements together, and I think it may be successful, I would say. But we do get a huge volume of emails, and I think Cecile was nodding specifically these days. So it's very tough, but hopefully you get through the door.
Cecile, did you want to add something?
Yeah, can I just add that even if you have the best email, sometimes a faculty member will not reply because the faculty member does not have a viable funding and a viable project. So don't always take it personally that you don't get a reply, even if your email was very well drafted. Keep trying, but sometimes a faculty member won't reply, even if the faculty member is interested in your profile, because There's just at the present time, there was no funding. Sometimes faculty members will forward, like for example, if I receive an email from a student who seems to have an interesting profile, but I cannot take the student on, I may forward the email to a colleague or somebody else. So, but yeah, it is not easy. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you both very much. Cecile, can you talk a little bit about the direct admit PhD option for someone who maybe wants to go directly from a bachelor's into a PhD?
Yeah, so it is possible, but it's really a case by case. Yeah, so you need to have a very strong academic background. So you need to have high grades and as well some research experience. So it can be through an internship or a co-op, but we won't be sure that you can be able to start right away a PhD. So sometimes maybe this safest maybe or safer option would be to start as MAC. And if after 1 or 2 terms things are going really well and your supervisor is very keen and feel that you can go to the next level, you can transfer to the PhD program from MAC as well. Yeah, so.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Oh,
sorry, Sarah. I can add that also as a supervisor for really talented master's students in my portfolio, at least within the first 2 semesters or so, we have the conversation of, your program aligns with a PhD. Are you interested? And so on. So it's also possible that you start with a master's and may end up with a PhD, which was my path. I didn't intend to start with a direct PhD, but it just ended up happening just by virtue of a match, a really good match.
That's great. Thank you. Cecile, you were talking about funding. Specifically, we were talking about the guaranteed minimum funding. Can you just clarify, is that guaranteed minimum funding for domestic students and international students?
Yes, for everybody, domestic and international students, yes.
So all research-based students are getting that guaranteed minimum funding.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so circling back, Fatima, you have experience in finding a supervisor. You started, I believe you said, in an MH program and moved into a research-based program. How did you connect with a supervisor? What did you find worked well for you?
So I guess my case is slightly special in the sense that I did finish my master's, so it's not that I actually transferred, but I think, the experience in my master's helped me kind of find a supervisor for my PhD, although it's more kind of, for me, was a case of like the opportunity was already available, not that I would, specifically creating an opportunity. But I think what happened is what Professor Miguel mentioned is that the connection of interest. So during my master's, there were courses that I really liked the field of study, and I decided to take those courses as extra to my degree, even though I couldn't get them as, they couldn't count towards my degree. So I took them because I really liked them, and my passion was kind of evident to the professor that was teaching the course. But I guess my advice for connecting to supervisors in general, and this comes from my experience of over like 4 years working with students, applying to jobs, grad school, and things like that at the Center of Career Action, is that kind of think of professors in like 2 different ways. So they are professors that teach you in class, and they would always, maybe reply your email or answer your questions, but sometimes their research is like a company. So a professor is kind of hiring you it's like hiring a worker in a company. So think about how, even if you're applying to jobs, you apply to like 50 jobs, but when you're applying to research, sometimes we assume that we just need to email 1 professor or email 2, but it's kind of similar to kind of job applications. You're always trying to put your best foot forward. You're summarizing your experience. You're thinking about what part of your experience aligns with the research that the supervisor is doing. A tip I typically have is that, try to read, people say read their papers. I would say in addition to that, maybe even read the background section of the thesis from the student in their research group, because that gives you a knowledge of like the background knowledge required by that field. So you don't have to know the complex things. remember, it's not what you know that matters, it's what you're willing to learn. So just, it's about communicating that I have the background knowledge, and a good place to kind of get the background without a lot of the academic jargons that you probably are not familiar with is the thesis. So always think about it like a job application. I'm applying to jobs. It's all right if the first person doesn't reply or the first person doesn't hire me immediately. That doesn't mean I won't keep applying. I hope this is useful.
That is great insight. Thank you very much. Cecile, a little bit about the application process. Specifically, can you tell us if MME requires a GRE score for any of the programs?
We require a GRE score for the MEng program if you are an international student. Yes. For the research degree, no GRE score.
Thank you. And then a little bit more just about the application process. So if someone applies for the MASC program and they're unsuccessful in finding a supervisor, are they automatically considered for the MEng program? Or if you want to be considered for the MEng program as well, you need to submit a separate application?
Yeah, you need to submit a separate application just because the admission process is completely different between MASC and MEng. So yes, if you want to be considered for MASC and MEng, you may submit 2 separate applications at the same time. It's okay. It's just, yeah, the process is completely different for admission.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, lots of questions still coming in about connecting with a supervisor. So obviously the points you guys are making are being well received and generating a lot of thought here. So we talked about what to say when you're contacting a supervisor. Is it better to go, maybe I'll start with Mihaela, is it better to go directly to that supervisor? Like, how should you be contacting them? Is email really the best way?
Yeah, so because we live in a bit of a digital space these days, I find that a lot of my engagements with students that do become graduate students within kind of my portfolio, or students that I refer to other colleagues, maybe through avenues of engagement that may be quite unique as well. So the cold call via email is the traditional way to get noticed, and it does work. Other ways are if you find that you're genuinely interested in a research field and in that professor's portfolio, attending or sending out an email, well in advance saying, hey, I'm really interested in graduate studies, even if you're not able to essentially adopt me in your graduate studies portfolio. Do you have, tips or other faculty members that you think you could refer me to? Do you have 10 minutes of your time to talk to me about what is it that a graduate student does in your field? And it's such a low-hanging fruit to communicate with a professor in that aspect, as more so, I would say, a mentorship role in terms of guiding you to a career path that you're really passionate about, as well as essentially communicating via LinkedIn, or if we're going to conferences. I've met quite a few of my I've engaged with students at conferences as well. So these are all avenues that may work. And also because a lot of the research is done now, some of it has transitioned to remote work. You can reach out and, let's say you're in your last year of undergraduate, you can say, well, I would really like to do a small internship or a URA with your group, just to learn about what you guys are doing, to see if it aligns with my research interest. So all of those avenues are okay to even interact and engage with a professor, but it does take some time. For instance, if you want to start a graduate program in a year from now, now's the time to have those discussions that are a little bit more mentorship or relationship building, right? So it does take work, and it can result in disappointment. But again, there are multiple ways outside of emails, and I hope I covered some of those. I don't know, Fatima, if any of these kind of ring a bell with what your experience was. But certainly some of the students that do reach out and connect via those avenues, I at least I spoke with them or engaged with them as well.
Yeah, I know the email one is a very popular one. And I think something to keep in mind is that I think this also touched on another question, like how do I know if a professor rejected me? Some people would not reply to your emails, and that's okay. So think of it as a process where you're learning to craft really, really good emails. So you could play around with your subject lines. You could, try different things that you send those emails. For some people also, maybe your emails, think about it like, this is me sending an email to someone, maybe asking clear, actionable items. Can I meet with you to talk about graduate studies in this area? Or do you have 10 minutes, like specifically saying 10 minutes, like Professor Miguel said? I know some people would say that they gain knowledge by contacting other grad students in the professor's lab. So if that's something like you feel like I haven't become quite clear on what I'm going to say in my email, what this field is, maybe you would have luck reaching out to grad students in that lab. That doesn't necessarily guarantee admission or anything, but it's a way to kind of network. And now conferences are virtual, so which means it might be easier to even attend it and even send them a message on those platforms if that is something that would be useful for you. And I'm just specifically answering the question, like, how do I know if a supervisor rejected me so I can move on? You can't know unless they reply and tell you, oh, sorry, we don't have a space. I think just try to think of it as a job application. You're applying to several jobs. And this is also an opportunity for you to learn about the different research areas, so you can find a research area that lands perfectly for you. So it's not that you have to contact only one supervisor at a time.
That's great. Thank you both very much. Cecile, we talked a little bit about intellectual property being creator-owned at the University of Waterloo. For a student that maybe already has some patents and publications under their belt and is looking forward to build out their own ideas, would you recommend an MEng path for them or an MASC program for them?
I guess it's going to depend a little bit on the kind of idea or stage of the idea that maybe you're at. But if you're thinking of something that would require a bit more research and maybe additional expertise, then if MAC may be a good option, because you could build your research project build from your idea, but you're going to have to find a supervisor who would be interested in contributing to this project. So that's so it's maybe not always easy. MEng is only course-based. So again, depending on the kind of idea, like for example, the GDIP in engineering design may be something very useful to formulate. If this is something that requires some design to move forward, there may be something useful to somehow formulate better the design and maybe eventually the manufacturing stage of your idea. So it's hard to say. It's really going to depend on the idea that this potential student has in mind, or the patent. One option could be to actually contact several faculty members and see a bit what their response is going to be. Explain your idea, what you want to do, and see what they suggest. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much. If a student is looking for a faculty member in a specific area, say they're interested in additive manufacturing or autonomous vehicles or whatever, how would they go about finding a list, Cecile, of faculty members that are in that area?
At the department web pages. So we have the list of all faculty members. We have the list of a list of research areas, and then like with these research clusters that Mihaela mentioned, and then you have the list of faculty members within each of these research cluster, and then you can check the faculty member web page and see a bit what they're doing, and then contact them. Yeah, that's the best way.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. Mihaela, you obviously run a very active lab. Is it possible, or how would a student go about getting a placement in a lab or an internship in a lab before starting graduate studies to find out if it's something maybe that they're really truly interested in?
So I've had quite a bit of success in working with co-op students, and not necessarily just University of Waterloo co-op students, but co-op students from other universities as well that had started their engagement with our research lab in their undergraduate studies and then came back as graduate students. So that was quite successful. As well as I mentioned, undergraduate research assistantships, those are quite popular for University of Waterloo students to test out research programs and for me to essentially engage with the student community to see if there's a match. Now, students that are potentially external to the University of Waterloo community or students that are not necessarily domestic, doing internships is a little bit more difficult before your graduate studies just by virtue of either geography or essentially access to resources. So if you're not even located within the same province, it's a little bit more difficult, but it's not impossible. So for instance, one of my PhD students who's starting in January, I started my engagement with them because they had a really interesting area of research in their master's. They said, they may be interested in working in our lab or in a graduate degree. So just to see how well we match, because 4 years is a very long time to be with a supervisor or a student that maybe you don't necessarily see eye to eye or you don't match in terms of research. We did a 3-month remote internship. So that's an option as well. And some faculty members prefer to do that, to do a very short engagement with the student before they commit to a full degree. So you don't know until you ask the faculty member. So I do encourage, if you really have some skills that you think are really applicable to that professor's domain, put that also in your email to them saying, if right now you don't have a graduate position, I'm willing to do, a part-time position. I think I can bring these skill sets. Are you still interested? If you have the bandwidth to do that, of course, not too many people do. I don't know, Cecile, if you have comments on that as well.
Yeah,
in terms of internships.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit case by case. It's much easier if you're already a Waterloo student, like undergraduate, because first it's easier to contact faculty members, and then you're local. If you're outside the University of Waterloo, yeah, it is worth trying and see what some professors may suggest. Yeah, but it's not as easy. It's not impossible, but this can be really a case by case. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you both very much. So as we are getting ready, our next intake is going to be for fall 2022. So for students that are applying, when can they expect, Cecile, for a decision to be made? So if they're applying, for example, in the next couple months, when do the bulk of decisions for fall going to be made? And how does it differ in terms of decisions made for MEng versus MASC?
Okay, so for MASC, the decision will come from a faculty member. I mean, as long as your application, you fit all the eligible criteria, and so you're admissible, then the decision will come when a faculty member wants to make an offer. And this varies in time. That's why sometimes it can take a long time. So it's not the grad office deciding on, okay, we sent, so what happens is that when we have applications still open on our system, we're going to send regular reminders to potential supervisors, faculty members, to let them know there are still these applications outstanding, please have a look, and so on. So for MEng students, the admission is a bit different because that can be done, the admission process is done by the Department Graduate Studies Committee. And that's typically, so that means all the offers will happen at the same time. And that's typically, it depends a little bit, but because I don't want to commit to a certain time, and if you don't get the decision, you're going to be disappointed. But it's going to be done typically faster, possibly faster than for MASC, because that's we are going to do all the decisions all in one meeting with 5 or 6 people together. So yeah, I don't give a specific timeline because that varies term to term, but it's usually a bit faster than MASC.
That's great. And then sort of speaking to the applicant pool that you receive, how much diversity is there in the background of the students that are applying? Are they all MME undergrads? Or for example, one of our prospective applicants has a computer science degree and is interested in automotive engineering. Is that something that MME would consider in the admissions process?
Yes, definitely. We do actually accept quite a few students from outside mechanical engineering. So it can be from other engineering discipline or departments, and as well from computer science, sometimes from applied math, even from physics. So it's going to depend really on your background, and then it's like a matching process. So your background, and then the project for which the supervisor is going to possibly take you on. But like computer science, there seems to be quite a lot of overlap with AI. So if a faculty member, looks at your application and sees that you have, the right courses, good grades, good profile, because also we look at all the different experience you may have as well, not just the grades and courses, then no problem, you may have an offer. That's it is open to other students outside mechanical engineering. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, can I just add that my undergraduate was in electrical engineering. I had no MME undergrad, and I got into a master's at MME. So.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect example. Thank you very much. Cecile, we talked about the guaranteed minimum funding, and we talked about TA-ships. We say that the guaranteed minimum funding is, say, $18,000 per year for a master's student. How is that funding broken down? Like, how frequently does the student receive funding? Is it every month? Is it every term?
For the 18,000, or it's every term? Yeah, it's broken down into terms. So you have to pay the tuition at the beginning of every term. So you'll get this in 3 installments. And for TA positions, this also happen every term. So there's no guarantee that you'll be able to TA 3 terms out of 3 terms. Yeah, I think it's very common to have 2 TA positions over the 3 terms. It really depends, but typically, at least until now, I think grad students haven't had really any issue to find TA positions in a department. So
great, thank you very much. Mihaela, maybe we have time for 1 or 2 more questions here. What would be sort of your ideal applicant? What sort of experience would they have? Obviously, they would have good academic strength. But what other types of experiences, like projects, co-ops, internships, that kind of thing, would you be looking for?
It's a very difficult question, actually, because every single time I look at recruitment for graduate students, the projects or the area of focus is very different. So it has to be a match for me with specific areas that I'm trying to support, which may or may not be transparent to the student at that time. So that makes it even more complicated. But in terms of what I look for in a student are definitely, can you actually manage an academic workload? So grades do speak to that. Perhaps your projects that you are involved with in undergraduate, or if you've had a master's degree in that degree. So I do look at what projects you've worked on and whether or not those align in terms of competencies with the research that I'm hoping to work with that student on. Also, if they have previous experience in the workplace that specifically may align with what I'm looking for, that's also value. But ultimately, I'm aware that students will not have the expertise that I'm hoping they will gain through their graduate program. So that is something that all faculty members are fully aware of. We're looking for potential, right? So I would say I also interview graduate students. So for a single graduate role, I probably connect with 3 or 4 students, and I'm really looking for excitement and interest in the field, because if I have a student who is super academically bright, looks great on paper in terms of marks, but I have to work very, very hard to keep them excited and engaged in their research, it just doesn't work as well as a student who maybe is not top of their class, but is extremely passionate and willing to learn. So if you can convey that even through your email, that, I'm not completely, 100%, my background may not 100% align, but I'm really passionate about these areas that overlap yours. I think that's half the battle as a supervisor, is to keep students engaged, excited, and independently searching for solutions as opposed to holding their hand. So if you can demonstrate that, I think it's really a good match.
That's great. Thank you very much. Well, that brings us to 2 o'clock. So first of all, thank you very much to all of our panelists. This wraps up our Ask Me Anything event for the Department of for Mechanical and Mechatronics Engineering. My apologies. Thank you to everyone for your insightful answers to all of today's questions. Don't forget, if you haven't yet registered for our Waterloo Engineering Graduate Studies Alumni Panel, which is happening this Friday, November 5th from 12 to 1 Eastern Daylight Time, you can still sign up to attend. We will add the link and information to the chat now. This virtual event will feature alumni panelists from our graduate program who will speak about the impact their graduate degree had on their career path. Thank you once again to all of our panelists, and we look forward to welcoming you to Waterloo Engineering in the near future. Have a great day.